Rick Callender. I'm CEO of the Santa Clara Valley Water District, also known as Valley Water. You know, as we sit here, you can tell that it's drizzling just a little bit, but that does not change the fact that we're still in a severe drought. This little bit of rain is not going to do it. It's welcome, but it's not going to do anything to get us out of the severe drought. As you look at where we stand today, we have the Sierra snowpack at the 5th lowest level that it's ever been. That's disturbing. We have both our federal and our state water transfers are being cut. We are not getting the same amount of water that we get on our contracts. We have Anderson Dam, our largest reservoir in the county, which is completely empty. We're trying to purchase much emergency water as we can to make sure we're getting through the drought. But conservation is definitely a way of life. Our board has taken very dramatic measures to make sure that conservation and a 15% conservation will be met. So today you're going to be hearing from two different individuals. First, the chair pro tem of our board, who I'll introduce just in a second, who's going to talk about some of the board actions that we take. And then second, you'll hear from the Deputy Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California, who will talk about what we can do and what the state of California is doing. So first, I'm going to start off with the chair pro tem of our board of directors, who's going to talk about some of the actions that our board of directors has recently taken in order to deal with this drought. Chair Varela.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, CEO Rick Callender. Appreciate the introduction. My name is John Varela, with Valley Water Chair Pro Tem, and I would like to acknowledge colleagues that's here today, Mr. Richard Santos, who's a resident of this region, and I see Mr. Director Estremera has just arrived as well, so we welcome you here today. Any other directors here that I don't see? I don't see, okay. Before I continue, I would like to thank Secretary Crowfoot for joining us today for this news conference. I look forward to the remarks about the impact this drought is having statewide. As CEO Callender explained, our drought emergency is serious. We are now in a third straight year of drought with no end in sight. Last June, my fellow board members and I acted swiftly to use our state law authority to declare an emergency water shortage condition and calling for a 50% reduction in water use compared to 2019. We also increased our funding for our conservation program, including the landscape rebate program to get people to change out their lawns for a drought resilient yard. On Tuesday, my fellow board members and I took another step to increase our conservation levels and goals. We're calling on the public to restrict watering usage no more than 2 days a week. If you do water outdoors, only water at night in the evenings. There's less evaporation. We also ask the public to prioritize watering of trees instead of lawns. Climate change is expected to result in more extreme droughts and will continue to threaten our water supplies. One solution in leading out of this drought and future droughts is increasing our county use of purified water. Purified water is a drought-resilient and locally controlled water source. Recycling and purifying water creates a new drought-proof water supply. Valley Water must be ready to take advantage of funding opportunities that are coming our way from the state and the federal government. Making smart investments in infrastructure is critical in providing safe, clean water, flood protection, and environmental stewardship for Santa Clara County. Now, I would like to hand it back to our CEO, Rick Callender.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem. Now I'd like to introduce someone who has been a partner with us. We cannot resolve this situation unless we're in partnership with the state of California as well as others, as well as in partnership with all of you locally. We cannot do this alone. We have to do this together. And so at that, I'd like to introduce the Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California, Secretary Wade Crowfoot.
Well, thanks so much, Rick. It's great to be here with you on the shore of the San Francisco Bay on what is a rainy day. We're here because we haven't had enough of these days. And I'm here to tell you to make no mistake, this rainy weather we're experiencing across the bay today is not going to make a difference in a bad drought that is worsening by the month. And I'm here on behalf of Governor Newsom to help us all understand the water conditions we have across the Bay and the state, and importantly, what we can do about it. Now, it was a very confusing winter. We had a huge rainstorm in October, which we call an atmospheric river, dropped record amounts of rain in October, followed by a dry November, followed by Snowmageddon, which some of us were calling it in December, with just a tremendous amount of snow. And so some folks may not realize the severity of the drought. Since January 1st, since the new year, we have had the driest first 3 months of any year in the state's history. In fact, we have less than 50% of the snow and rain since the new year as the second driest beginning of the year. We are now into a third year of drought, and given just how dry 2022 has started, we are facing exceedingly challenging water supply conditions. Now, this current 3-year drought takes place only after a major drought between 2012 and 2016, considered the worst drought in modern history. California is no stranger to drought, but we know that warming temperatures in the winter and the spring and the summer are worsening these droughts. Consider the Sierra snowpack. Last winter, we lost most of our Sierra snowpack to record warm spring temperatures, meaning most of that Sierra snowpack either absorbed into the ground, into very dry soils, or evaporated into the air amidst warming temperatures. And we're experiencing the same thing once again this winter that we're just coming out of. That snowpack that we depend on, first of all, there wasn't enough of it, and then more of it is absorbing into the soils or evaporating into the air as a result of warming temperatures. So we know that climate change is making our drought situation more challenging, much like it's making our wildfire situation more challenging. So the important question is, what can we do about it? What can we do to adapt to this new normal of worsening drought conditions? And there's quite a lot that we can do and that we need to do to adapt to these drought conditions. First of all, we need to support local water agencies like Valley Water that are doing the right thing by diversifying their water supplies. We can no longer depend on one specific water supply from a certain river, for example. We need to utilize more types of water supply, including managed groundwater, recycled water, capturing stormwater, even desalination in some places. Diversifying these water supplies helps us get through these dry periods. We can also do much more to become efficient with the water that we use and conserve more water. And I'm so thankful, Rick, to Valley Water for increasing the amount of subsidies or incentives for businesses, for homeowners to shift their yards from ornamental grass that they don't use to vibrant plants, native plants, drought tolerant plants that look great and that also reduce water usage. So clearly our local leaders, our local water agencies have a role to play. In Sacramento, we have a role to play by funding those efforts across the state to build drought resilience. But I would say all of us in our individual lives have a role to play. Actions that you can take now will help us get through this drought. In the process, keeping our communities safe and healthy, keeping our families healthy and safe, and keeping this beautiful natural environment in balance. So we can all take actions to use less water, to be conscientious about the water that we're using in our daily lives, to take actions to reduce our outdoor water usage if we own homes that have yards, either by changing out our landscapes, repairing leaks, being thoughtful about abiding those irrigation requirements given our drought. There's a lot we can do indoors too. We can shift out old appliances for new, more water efficient appliances. We can change our behavior. Some of my friends I've educated in washing the dishes. You know, you have to turn the water off between the dishes that you use. It's these small actions that actually add up. In the last drought, California stepped up in a heroic way to reduce their water usage. in that 3-year period between 2012, 2015, 2016, they reduced water usage across the state by almost 25%, which is really remarkable. And so we're asking for that leadership once again. We are making the investments that we need to build our longer-term water resilience in partnership with our local water agencies. And while we do that, we need everyone's help taking focused efforts in your own life to reduce your water usage, to get us through the summer, and to build your own drought resilience moving forward. So we are here. Governor Newsom is committed. Our state legislature is committed in working with local communities to navigate through this drought and ultimately to adapt to this new normal of climate change. Voy a hablar un poquito en español. California ha sufrido los 3 meses más secos registrados en la historia, y la sequía está empeorando a lo largo del oeste del país. Los extremos climáticos ya son parte de nuestra realidad, y por eso tenemos el deber de adaptarnos y hacer nuestra parte para conservar el agua todos los días. Usted puede ayudar a reducir el uso de agua al regar su jardín o al reparar las fugas de agua. Juntos podemos ahorrar agua para el bien de nuestro futuro. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. And before we open for questions, just a quick reminder that we're, just a short distance from here, we're going to be having our shoreline groundbreaking. Often people forget, after droughts, what you get is flooding. So this is not just a reminder that not only we work in the flood industry, but what comes directly after drought. So with that, I'm going to open for questions that you may have of either the chair, myself, or Secretary Crowfoot.
So how does this new project relate to the drought? I mean, you touched on it a little bit now, but could you expand a little bit more on how this will help with California's effort to save water?
When you're saying the new project, you're talking about the recycled water project?
No, the shoreline.
Oh, the shoreline project. Well, the shoreline project is actually a flood protection project which protects against sea level rise. It's going to be one of the largest flood protection as well as conservation projects west of the Everglades. So this doesn't help with the drought, but it protects against what comes after drought, which is flooding.
I'll add something to that. Just briefly, great point, Rick. You know, while we navigate the drought, we also have to prepare for floods. What we know about climate change is it's worsening our extreme weather. So remarkably, amidst a period of extended drought, we can experience these atmospheric rivers. And what climate change is doing is intensifying these winter storms. That's a big deal in the San Francisco Bay Area, obviously, because almost 4 million people live around the Bay, and we have infrastructure, investments, and nature around the Bay. This is a remarkable transformational project because it's really a win-win project that's both protecting us from flood and improving and restoring the environmental habitat. And I know Rick, and as well as leaders from the Army Corps of Engineers, are excited to take us out there and talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. All right, any other drought-related questions?
To the Secretary, a question, please.
Yeah.
Realistically speaking, how close to the tipping point are we in terms of mandating conservation as opposed to voluntary conservation?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So Governor Newsom issued an executive order 2 weeks ago, and it actually directs or calls for directing our local water agencies like Valley Water to trigger their water shortage contingency plans. By state law, each of our local water agencies has to have essentially an emergency drought plan. And that plan has to have 6 stages. And at each stage anticipates a water shortage of a certain amount. And then each stage has specific requirements that then they would impose. Governor Newsom is asking our state regulator, called the Water Board, to consider imposing on our local water agencies stage 2 of their water shortage plans. Stage 2 anticipates a shortage of 10 to 20%. The difference of approach compared to last drought is during the last drought, and I worked for Governor Brown during the last drought, at one point we created a percentage of mandated reduction across the state. And what we heard from our local communities is that one-size-fits-all approach had unintended consequences in different parts of the state. Meaning, a place like the Bay Area experiences drought very differently than Los Angeles or the North Coast or the Central Valley. So our focus right now is requiring that every community have a specific plan that's customized to the water supplies that they have and the challenges that they have. And so now what we're doing is directing those water agencies, those local water agencies, to implement their specific plans. This will include requirements. And actually, the general manager Callender explained that there are now requirements on residents of Valley Water or users of Valley Water. For example, mandatory restrictions. The difference is these restrictions, these requirements, these incentives are being implemented locally. And then the question of this question of a tipping point, would we do things differently? Would we take more actions? We'll have to see. One thing we all know about a drought is you can't predict its end. And so last year, the governor took a series of actions based on last year's water conditions, and then updated those in the executive order just a couple weeks ago. So we'll continue to monitor conditions and take additional actions as needed. But right now, what we're doing is working to support our local water agencies as they trigger that stage 2 of their water shortage contingency plans.
Other questions?
For Mr. Callender, your thoughts on these more affluent communities where we're seeing some large spikes in water use, even though the message has gone out to reduce usage, and what is your thought and the board's thought on even stiffer fines and penalties for folks who don't pertain to water use?
Well, like I said in the beginning, we're in this all together. It doesn't matter if you're affluent, it doesn't matter what level of affluence you may have. But what we want everyone to do is to cut their water use by 15%. We know a lot of folks have already reached that, and we applaud them in doing that. However, what we need is everyone to take this serious. So regardless of if you can afford an additional supply of water, you're still part of our community, and we need your support in order to do this. What we're going to be doing is bringing to our board in May, the first meeting of May, we're going to be bringing additional recommendations for additional restrictions, for additional enforcement, as well as additional means and methods in order to achieve the mandatory 15% that we're looking for. So we are going to be ratcheting this up and moving this forward. I'm going to look to our Chair Pro Tem to see if he has anything else he'd like to add.
I do. So we're also, we have 13 water retailers. We have 15 cities. Some of those cities are also water retailers. We want to have a consistent message on what we're talking about in conservation levels. Some of the I'm going to use Morgan Hill as an example because I live in Morgan Hill, and the city is a water retailer. They adopted a program which is really terrific, and they were partnered with Valley Water. It's a monitor meter on all hookups, and it'll send you a text and an email when you overwater. It'll remind you, hey, by the way, homeowner, this is the amount of water that you used this period, be aware. Now, again, we're not police. We're not going to come in. We're not going to fine you. It's a reminder that all of us are in this. So if we had continuity on these programs with all the cities and all the retailers, wow, we wouldn't have to have these conversations and reminders constantly we are in a drought, we need to conserve, and we're all in it together. So that's what I wanted to share with you.
Further questions?
At a county level, how close are we to reaching that 15%?
I'm going to ask for Kristen Struve, our assistant operator under the water utility, to talk about exactly where we are.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So tracking it cumulatively from when the board made the call, we have a 6% reduction right now. February didn't look so good because we compared to 2019 baseline, and in 2019 we had over 5 inches of rain, and obviously now we have none. So people did turn on their outdoor watering, and our use was up 23%, which wasn't great news, but we expect most of the savings to happen from reducing outdoor water use, and so we hope that cumulatively we will be meeting the 15% this year.
Any further questions? If not, I want to thank everyone for being here today. We definitely need to make sure we are achieving that 50% for Santa Clara County. We'll continue to work from our board to put additional restrictions in place, but we have to do this together. We're in this together, and we can achieve the results if we're doing this and working together. So at that, I'm going to ask everyone to join us at the shoreline groundbreaking. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, how are you? Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, good to see you. How goes it? Good. You guys are doing a good job. You're kind of ground zero, but you're working in so many different ways.